National will and resolve demand that those men who have been found guilty of treason towards the state die tomorrow publicly at the national harvest ceremony. The will of the state is supreme. Destiny has entrusted in her hands the will of the state.
Well-known writer and playwright Wole Soyinka would create the stage play Kongi's Harvest, first performed in Lagos in 1965 by the 1960 Mask and the Orison Theatre Troupe, two theatre groups Soyinka founded. The stage play would then be performed in other areas across the country, and later would be published by the Oxford Unity Press in 1967. The story of the stage play would relatively stay the same during playings. President Kongi is the dictator of the fictional nation of Isma, after successfully dethroning the previous leader, King Oba Everything he's ever wanted is within his grasp, except for one thing. He wants to preside over the festival of the New Yam, but this can't happen unless Danlola gives his blessing and is seen at the festival bringing Kongi the New Yam in front of the Ishma people.
Why didn't you say so at once? Tell us the leader's wishes.
The New Yam. The president wants you to find a way to make Oba Danlola give up the ritual of the New Yam to him, our leader.
So Danlola is held in preventive detention and is pressured by Kongi to give in. In comes Daudu, the owner of a farm who plans on winning first prize in the agricultural show, and Segi, the owner of a bar Daudu frequents. They and their group aren't too fond of Kongi's rule either, and the secretary, Kongi's right-hand man and negotiator between the two parties, attempts to influence them in certain directions. Kongi decides to push the scales and use the 5 prisoners he has as bargaining chips.
Tell your Danlola I'll reprieve those men if he cooperates fully.
Unfortunately, 2 men escape, one of which being Segi's father. After his escape, he, Segi, and Daudu organize a plan to assassinate Kongi during the festival. Once we get to the play's last act, things get interesting as the ending can differ depending on which version you are currently watching. The 1967 version, published in the Oxford University Press, ends on the day of the festival. Daudu gives a short speech. Danlola presents the new yam to Kongi, and just as he grabs it, a gunshot is heard throughout the square. Kongi looks around in a panic, but the secretary whispers something in his ear, which changes his expression from shock to maniacal laughter. Then the secretary goes to Segi and tells her that her father has been killed, meaning that their assassination attempt has failed. Despite the news and assumed failure, Segi insists on letting the festival continue, alluding to having something up her sleeve. The feast commences as Kongi enjoys himself to the fullest. Soon, a copper salver is raised high and passed around until it reaches Kongi's table. Segi opens the lid and in it lies the head of Segi's father. Everyone panics and vacates the area except for Kongi, who is left alone with his mouth wide open in speechless terror. Following this scene is an epilogue titled Hangover, where the secretary and Dende, Danlola's assistant, talk amongst themselves in the littered aftermath of Kongi Square. Dende takes the back seat as Danlola arrives and discusses Segi's stunt, what has occurred since, and what the consequences of those actions could be. In future versions of the play, for example during the University of Ibadan Arts Theatre playing in 1966, Soyinka would cut the epilogue out, so the play would end on Kongi alone, presented with the head of Segi's father, leaving audiences to wonder what will happen to him and his regime. Another alternative ending of the play was found in an undated typescript for what would be the film version of the story. This ending changes things drastically. The plan to assassinate Kongi is still constructed, but this time they actually succeed. Next came a confrontation between the captain of the Carpenters Brigade and Segi's father.
You overlooked something. The brigade.
You heard your price?
It's rather high.
How high?
Gallows high.
The situation has changed.
The captain replies, "Not for us," while Segi, Daudu, the secretary, and Danlola all stay in position in a high-angle shot. The captain speaks up once more. "You haven't much time." Then we pull from the tableau to a wider shot of the square. The quiet crowd looks upon these 2 men and Kongi's body as the shot widens even more, becoming an aerial view of the city as the theme plays. That only leaves us with the movie. Francis Oladele had established Cowpenny Nigeria Limited, the first indigenous film production company in Nigeria. He planned on setting up the conditions that would allow films to be produced in Nigeria and requested that Ossie Davis come with him to Nigeria to direct Kongi's Harvest. Hesitant at first, he would come along after he finished shooting his current film. So this film had the luxury of filming on site. Many scenes were shot in Lagos, Ibadan, and Aluma Rock in Abeokuta. Wole Soyinka was thoroughly involved in the creation of the film, as he wrote the script, aided with production, and played the role of Kongi, since the original actor couldn't do so.
And later on, I had to wear what I had designed because the actor couldn't come out of Biafra. It was filmed after the Biafran War of Secession. And Gary Sanoka, who used to be in my acting company, and for whom I had partially even written that role, even that was based on African dictators generally. He wasn't cleared, and we filmed around all the scenes. We didn't involve Kongi until we had no choice. Ossie Davis had to wrap up. Somebody had to play Kongi. And I suppose I was the nastiest looking person on the set. And Ossie said, "Sorry, Wole, you have to take it on."
The actors were Nigerian, the crew was Swedish, and neither group spoke English well, which meant that communication was difficult during production. Cultures also clashed, as Davis would direct the actors as if they were American instead of better understanding and working with the acting style of Nigerians. The film was released in 1970, and in regards to the plot, it is most similar to the undated typescript version, all the way up to Kongi's assassination and the discussion with the captain.
The situation has changed.
The film cuts to a new location, with Segi's father replacing Kongi and repeating the same chant he did in the film.
The will of the state is supreme. Destiny has entrusted in our hands the will of the state.
Now, this would be the end of the presentation, but there's one last interesting topic to discuss. The fact that Wole Soyinka distanced himself from the film. The film doesn't credit Soyinka for the script, only that it was based on his play. He stated that the film had been badly butchered, that the film didn't adhere to his script, and described it as a cinema disaster. We could speculate more on why he didn't like the film, and speculate we will, but laying it out as I did makes it a bit clearer as to why Soyinka didn't like it. Production was rocky, and because of the challenges, important things like the Nigerian culture were lost. It's easy for an American to look at the broader picture and recognize some of the Nigerian culture being represented.
That sense of the culture, you do capture that on the film in a number of scenes. I think this is it's a wonderful film to be watching, not because it's ethnographic, but because it does in certain scenes capture all of that.
But if you look at the finer details, many things could have been improved.
I really needed more time so that the rhythms and the patterns of life, would have been more easily available to me and to my imagination.
Josef Gugler, in his article, put up some very good arguments for why Soyinka didn't like the film. Gugler explains that the film wasn't well produced, the budget was low, most actors were inexperienced, the editing poor, and the script was butchered in harmful ways, like not including the national anthem that begins the play. He also goes on to say that the final scene appeared to be tagged on, completely changed the ending of Soyinka's script, and that Soyinka's involvement ended when Kongi was killed. That last point is very interesting. When looking at the other versions of the story presented, all of them involve Kongi in some way. The 1967 version includes the epilogue, which discusses the aftermath of Segi's stunt. In this version of the story, Kongi didn't die, and this influences the discussion Danlola has with the secretary as it takes place in Kongi Square. The other version cuts the epilogue off, which means that we're still in the moment with Kongi, shocked by Segi's stunt. The typescript has Kongi die, but we never move from the moment, and even a deceased Kongi is still a character to be referenced to and still affects the story. The film, however, includes an ending that is completely cut off from Kongi. He is gone and Segi's father is in charge. It is a new regime with a new face. Another difference between the film and other versions of the story is the open-endedness presented in the final act. The audience is left to ponder with Obalola about the future of Ishma, left to wonder if Segi's efforts really dethroned Kongi, and left to think about the future of the Ishma people with the Ishma people. The movie has no such thing. We know what happens after Kongi is killed. Another man takes his place, power corrupts absolutely, and the regime stays intact despite its efforts to topple it. In closing, the story of how this film came into existence is a very interesting one to tell, as Kongi's Harvest was the first independently produced Nigerian feature film, making it very significant when discussing Nigerian film history. The multiple endings to the story are fascinating, but when looking deeper at and comparing the film's ending with the others, flaws and issues that weren't apparent before scream in your ear.
And do you know that to this very day, I have not totally forgiven myself for what I was and was not able to do with Kongi's Harvest as a filmmaker.